Greetings to you all in different parts of the world and welcome. I am Siegmar Gerken, the co-director with my wife of the International Training Institutes of Coevolution and CoreSoma, with its specialized trauma trainings and trainings for personal development and professional body-oriented psychotherapy. You find more under corevolution.com. I would like to use this video today to describe our work, here especially working with trauma and traumatic conditions. A topic that became more and more urgent for the individual well-being and the well-being of our societies. And as we can see on our daily basis, for a more harmonious unfolding of humanity. For that, we have to address the field from individual to collective trauma and beyond, and that we move toward healing and coherence. We live in a world of growing complexity and speed, with a constant flow of information, increasing global tensions and events like possible pandemics, wars, society and political changes, financial and numerous other insecurities and hardships. Our systems are more and more under heightened existential stress. Whether it's fear, caution, or denial, our individual constitution and learned attitudes then color how we respond to these threats and to the resulting stress. Hans Selye once defined stress as a non-specific response of the body to any demand. So according to this definition, stress does not necessarily need to be pathological. But when it becomes chronic and unresolved, stress often breaks down our ability for healthy self-regulation. That is where trauma work begins, helping individuals to restore the capacity for self-regulation, reconnecting with their resilience and reclaiming their natural rhythm of life. Because chronic stress that is linked to overwhelming or threatening events often become traumatic stress. And if left unresolved, this may evolve into post-traumatic stress. That means the system or the person still functions, but remains strained. And most of us experiences phases like that, or are unfortunately living life under such a condition still. You most likely have heard then the term post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. That is when trauma imprints deeply into the nervous system and affecting daily functioning through persistent symptoms like fear, numbness, nightmares, hypervigilance, or other situations. See, the Greek root of trauma means wound. That is, of course, the understanding that we also know from medicine. In psychology and our social life, we understand trauma as an emotional injury that exceeds the nervous system's capacity to process and integrate the event. It lingers and interferes or disrupts the body and the feeling and thought patterns. Modern neuroscience helps us to a great deal to understand trauma, but we also know from further expanded research that a trauma is not just in the brain. It lives in the entire body, feeling, mind field, as I express it in our work of Coevolution. And in the training program, I will also document more of this research in expanded neuroscience and the physics of the fields of life that we are living in. So, while neuroscience, of course, gives us valuable answers, it is limited in capturing the complex subjective reality of a trauma. That is why an integrative approach like Coevolution addresses the full human matrix of body, emotions, cognitive capacity, the mind, and consciousness. These days, we find important differentiations of trauma. A fundamental core type of trauma we describe is a developmental trauma, which arises over time in our early developmental periods, expressed in subtle or overt limitations caused by early intrusions into our integrity, which can be parental neglect, emotional coldness, systemic abuse, or other situations. It restricts the pulsation of life, as I describe it, our vital flow of aliveness. And these situations are often also mostly addressed in psychotherapy. Another important trauma in life can be shock trauma, which stems from sudden, overwhelming events like accidents, surgeries, abuse, or disasters. They can take place at any phase of our life and often leave a lasting energetic imprint. One powerful example I recall with a client who, as a baby of 6 months, needed an urgent surgery at the time when parents could not stay in the hospital. So physically he was well cared for. However, the emotional wound of abandonment intertwined then more and more with the developmental trauma, and later in life it manifested in relational insecurities. Fortunately, through integrative trauma work and other inner processes, connecting with his resources, he decided to become a trauma therapist himself, transmuting his wounding and suffering into a self-realization and into support of others. In our work, we can witness this transformation again and again, from suffering to joy, from withdrawal of life to accessing resources and expressing them into your personal life. As we all know, trauma does not stop at the individual level. It reverberates throughout our systems. As a family is a relational field, and whenever one member suffers, the whole system is affected, consciously or unconsciously. An unresolved family trauma such as grief, abuse, secrets, or exclusion can echo across generations, and with that becoming generational or transgenerational traumas as we describe them. And this transmission can happen through behavior and relational patterns and all relative and related activities, genetic and epigenetic changes, and of course also by morphogenetic fields, that means by invisible yet subtle impact fields of emotional, relational, and structural energy. Here we arrive at the topic of collective trauma and cultural fields. That means the wounding of entire societies. And this may stem from war, genocide and colonization, cultural oppression or systemic discrimination, environmental disasters or global pandemics. One has to reflect on one's own culture, society or country to become aware of how we are affected by these topics. Because if unacknowledged, these traumas often become normalized and more part of the cultural background, leading to a collective numbing and the erosion of human values. Therefore, healing collective trauma requires safe and trusted spaces for remembrance and dialogue. It requires intergenerational reconciliation, reconnection to culture, ancestry, and spiritual grounding, and youth and community empowerment, In our program, we will touch and work with all these topics, and you will learn how to approach them in a safe way. I conducted trauma trainings and our professional therapy trainings in the last 50 years on 4 continents, working globally, sometimes in very critical or difficult situations, like in Colombia, in Mexico, Brazil, Chile, the USA, Australia, and Europe. I've seen the unique expression of traumas in different cultures. And yet, the red thread of life connects us all. Since our life is like a fabric woven of both streams or threads, with situations of trauma or traumatic potential, and of course our natural, beautiful unfolding. As you understand by now and what we see in our work, at its core, trauma is a contraction of life's pulsation due to a loss of coherence. That means due to a loss of the unified organization of body, feelings, mind, energy, and consciousness. Therefore, true healing means restoring coherence with the body, feeling, mind field, strengthening self-regulation and inner integrity, shifting frozen historical patterns, reclaiming the will of the heart to live and express fully, and with that cultivating joy, love, resonance, and all life-affirming actions. This is where we move beyond the trauma and live our essence. Thank you for your presence for today. If you are interested in our specialized trauma trainings or in our professional psychotherapy trainings, please contact us and we send you further information about dates and places in the world where we conduct in-person or online trainings. www.coreevolution.com, like your core and its evolution. I wish you well on your path in life.